Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll get started. Don't forget to silence your gadgets. If you have anything for us to review, it would go to Mr. Curran. And we'll get rolling with a roll call. Madam Clerk.
Bell.
Here.
Curran.
Here.
Freeling.
Present.
Harrison.
Here.
Hinkleman.
Here.
Majerick.
Here.
Ott.
Here.
Pittsburgh.
Here.
Ballraff.
Here.
Werfel. Here. Yarborough. Elliott.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 11 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. The minutes from a week ago, anyone want to move those forward?
I'll make a motion.
Moved by Pitchford, supported by Freeland. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Are we doing requisitions?
We can, except my brain's not working this morning, so it's upstairs. Does anybody have any questions about the requisitions though?
Well,
All right, I'll go upstairs and get it and then I'll pass it around.
okay, no worries. We have a presentation via Zoom. We're pleased to have Mark Totten, who's the U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Michigan. Is he logged in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good morning, Mark.
Good morning. Can I ask if you all can see and hear me okay?
Can hear you. If I turn around, I think I can see you. Yep,
Okay.
okay, there you are.
Perfect.
So we've got about 15 minutes for Mr. Totten because he has a pretty full schedule today. So he's been able to free up some time to take any questions you may have. Brevity is the word for this morning in terms of getting through this part of the process, but does anyone have any questions for Mr. Totten?
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
so several commissioners did submit questions in
Right.
advance, so just as a reminder,
Right.
he's got those.
You've got those, Mark?
I do, yeah. Does it make
Okay.
sense? I'm prepared to answer those questions. I have them in front of me. Does it make sense to move through those or how do you want to proceed?
No, that'd be fine. Go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, just good morning, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate you inviting me to be here today. I'll just mention that in my role as U.S. Attorney, I serve as the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer over the Western District. That covers all of the Upper Peninsula and then the western half of the Lower Peninsula. And, you know, we have a lot of priority areas, certainly protecting national security, foreign and domestic terrorism, combating violent crime, disrupting the trafficking of drugs, public corruption, protecting civil rights. Those are all areas that we spend a lot of time on. So I'm happy to try to respond to the questions you all answered in terms of the grant I know that you're considering applying for. I have that list that Administrator Doucette presented to me. If I could maybe just share a couple quick thoughts by way of background. I want to just mention first that, you know, as you perhaps realize, I don't have any decision-making responsibility as to this grant. Certainly my office is part of the Department of Justice, but U.S. attorneys are not involved in that application process or the decision process. So I just wanted to mention that. And then second, I just wanted to mention why I generally support efforts to try to prevent violence anywhere across the district, and certainly in Berrien County too. You know, the bread and butter of what my office does is prosecuting crimes. Sometimes those are some of the most serious crimes that occur in the district. When a case makes its way to our office, of course, the harm has already happened, and really we're in a position of trying to react to that crime and to bring a measure of justice. At the same time, though, I care an awful lot, as I know you all do as well, about trying to prevent crimes from happening in the first place. You know, we will always fight for victims, but I'd rather somebody not be a victim if that can be avoided. And so I'm really eager, to the degree I'm able, to use my position to help advance solutions to prevent crime from happening in the first place. And, you know, certainly that goal has become even more important in the last few years as we've seen a pretty significant uptick in violence across the United States and Michigan as well. And, you know, Berrien County is no exception to that. You know, I was looking last night at the 2021 FBI crime data. You know, that data lists the number of crimes broken down by type of offense that occurred for each of the 412 municipal law enforcement agencies across the state. And if you isolate violent crimes and if you sort them from, the highest percentage per capita, 2 of the top 5 municipalities in the state out of 412 are there in Berrien County. And so, that's a striking statistic. It's even more striking when you realize the impact that violence is having on our young people. For most of history, disease was the #1 killer of young people. And then starting in the 1960s for roughly 50 or so years, 60 years, automobile accidents were #1. But starting in 2020, for the first time, the #1 cause of death for our kids became firearm-related violence. And so, knowing this, I want to try to do everything I can to try to protect people, especially our young people, from violence. And again, to try to prevent it rather than just reacting to it as we do with most of our work here. The grant that you all are considering funds programs that are meant to do that. They're meant to help prevent violence from happening in the first place. These programs create a community-wide partnership between community-based organizations, hospitals, researchers, government agencies, victim service providers, law enforcement, others, all with the aim of trying to reduce violent crime. They use evidence-based programs, and I'll say a little bit more about that when I respond to some of the questions. And they attempt to try to provide alternatives for people who might otherwise be on the wrong path so that they can make the right choice and not be in the position of being prosecuted by my office or by the county. And I'll lastly just say, and then I'll jump right into the questions, is that these programs are popping up all across the nation and all across Michigan. I know in my district, Kalamazoo has a program, Ingham County has a program, Grand Rapids has a program. And I know that there's other jurisdictions that are looking at them as well. So with that background in mind, let me just turn to the 12 questions that were shared with me, and then I'll try to give, concise answers. And they're all very thoughtful questions. So thank you to those of you who shared them. So question #1 was, how much of the money is for research and how much is for actual violence intervention operations? So the whole grant is for $2 million. As the grant application indicates, a strong application is going to include a research partner to ensure that the Department of Justice is spending its money in a manner that's effective and evidence-based. If the county agrees to it, there is a group of Michigan State University researchers that has offered to be the research partners working from the start through the finish of the 36-month grant. They would help guide the planning period as well as figure out what the metrics are to try to track. They'd collect and analyze data related to those metrics, and they do that in real time so that the project can be modified throughout the 3 years. This isn't a case where you have a researcher kind of coming at the end and doing like an after action assessment. It's continuous. I don't know this firsthand. My understanding is that roughly 20% seems to be about the average amount that the federal government typically allocates for research partners. So of course, if that were the case here, that would mean about $400,000 would go to research and about 1.6 million would go to actual prevention. The second question is, if any money can be allocated to intervention, what are the parameters for its use? Existing departments, sheriff, juvenile, veterans, does it have to go to a community nonprofit? If so, qualifications outlined in the grant. So the allocation is going to be decided during the proposed planning period. And again, this grant funds not just implementing a program that's already packaged up, but it actually funds time to plan a program, which is a really great part of this grant, because of course you need funding, you need time to do that, and you need funds to do that. So the funding could go to community nonprofits, to government agencies, juvenile justice service providers, schools, the county, et cetera. It really all depends on the scope of the project as decided by a group that represents the stakeholders during that planning period, which is all to say there's really considerable flexibility. I think you can design a program that's best for Berrien County. Question number 3, is this for gun and gang violence or all violence? Be specific. So, page 8 of the solicitation, and I'm just going to quote it, says that the Department of Justice's community-based violence intervention and prevention initiative, that's this grant, seeks to prevent and reduce violent crime in communities by supporting comprehensive evidence-based violence intervention and prevention programs. The solicitation then goes on to say that the program could focus on gun and gang violence, but it can include other forms of violence as well. So in other words, I think similar to the response to the last question, the grant really does afford considerable flexibility to design a program that works for Berrien County. Question number 4, is this for all age groups, men, women, adults, children? That's a good question. And potentially the answer is yes, any and all of the above. And I think it comes down to what the county decides and the partners, the stakeholders there, how they decide to design the program. Okay, next question, number 5. Can grant dollars be used to supplement existing programs such as school resource officers, road patrols, etc.? So in general, the grant dollars could add to or enhance existing community violence intervention programs. The money can't be used to fund existing programs as they now exist, which of course would just be supplanting costs. But I'll add, I think, just to be clear, the grant really is focused on community violence intervention programs that include partners across the spectrum, both government and non-government, taking measures to try and prevent crime. There's what I think is a kind of a nice summary of this approach on page 8, where it says, community violence intervention is an approach that uses evidence-informed strategies to reduce violence through tailored community-centered initiatives. These multidisciplinary strategic strategies engage individuals and groups to prevent and disrupt cycles of violence and retaliation, and establish relationships between individuals and community assets to deliver services that save lives, address trauma, provide opportunity, and improve physical, social, and economic conditions that drive violence. Question number 6, how did this grant opportunity come to the health department, and what was the driving reason for their request? And then I'm going to lump in with this answer the next question, which is, what was the reason for the health department being the applicant? So a few thoughts here. For this particular grant, the Department of Justice allows for many types of organizations to apply for the grant, including both government and non-government. So there's nothing in the grant solicitation that requires the health department to be the applicant. Moreover, even if the health department is the applicant, it does not have to be involved in the day-to-day implementation if the grant is actually awarded. As far as I'm aware, I believe that there were several considerations that suggested both that the county and the county's health department might be a positioned applicant for this grant. So let me mention a few of those considerations. I think first, having the county rather than just a particular municipality or even nonprofit apply for the grant was thought to create a stronger application, both because of the county's strong record administering grants and experience doing so, and also because of the larger geographical area would bring in more stakeholders across the community, which is really important for the program. Another consideration, second, was that in a community-based model, it's often important to have some degree of separation between a violence prevention program and law enforcement agencies. Now, the partnership with law enforcement agencies is really important, so I'm not suggesting otherwise, but oftentimes for those programs to be effective in preventing violence, they can't be perceived as an arm of law enforcement, and the credibility of these programs in reaching the people you want to reach often depends on that independence. So that's a reason why the sheriff's office, for example, was not recommended. And then a third consideration, I think, is just simply that the issue of violence, especially among kids, has really, and I think this has been recognized across the United States, has become a public health issue. As I mentioned earlier, in 2020, for the first time ever, violence became the #1 cause of death among children, ages 1 to 19. And of course, firearms are just one form of violence. So it makes sense that the health department would play a role in trying to respond to that. I'll also just mention, if it's helpful, that I know in that health departments in many other jurisdictions have played a role in these programs. For example, I know that the health department up in Ingham County plays a role in their program. Question 7, has financial services been able to commit to the additional requirements for reporting that this grant will require? Is there a reason that other municipalities, nonprofits, and eligible organizations are applying for this grant? So you can write in to this grant administrative help in the budget for the grant. So for example, you could pay part of, say, a health department staff administration salary with grant funding, or hire a separate grant administrator or manager through the grant funding. That hire could be part-time, they could be contractual. I think really, again, I think there's very considerable flexibility for you all to design it in a way that works for you. Question number 8, who will make up the CVI-PI team? This is like a task force that the required partnered research team will be working with. This should already be determined prior to filing the application as it is required in the abstract. Okay, so a few thoughts there. The composition of the team really would be for the county, the health department, in consultation with other stakeholders to decide. The solicitation does say that strong applications will have a diversity of stakeholders, such as community residents, local government agencies, victim service providers, community-based organizations, law enforcement, hospitals, researchers, and others. So I think, for a strong application, you would want to have that, but it really would be up for the community to decide who the right, and the county to decide who the right stakeholders are at the table. Question 9, what is our abstract? While we have been told that the grant will help with the planning and implementation, a timeline should already exist for the effort. So my understanding is that the abstract would be written once the grant is developed. Commissioners could certainly see all of the grant proposal pieces before that proposal is finally submitted. 10 of 12, who will be the research partner, and do we need to have a competitive process of selecting that partner? So as I mentioned, if the county agrees to it, the research partner could be a team of researchers from Michigan State University who have said that they're willing to play that role. Since the research team will have an active role in the grant's planning and implementation, in their role of designing, collecting, analyzing data in real time, that they really are an integral part of the grant implementation process. They're not, as I mentioned, kind of a separate entity that just kind of comes in at the end. They want to try to help, the folks who are implementing this program be able to make changes in real time to make sure that this is an effective, cost-efficient program. Okay, so because they're part of the project team, just like everyone else, there's usually no requirement that there be any kind of bidding process for that. I also just want to add, in terms of these folks, the particular researchers at MSU have offered to play this role are really some of the best in the nation. The university's School of Criminal Justice has a very strong national reputation. And in fact, one of the people who's offered to help with this program, if you all decide to pursue it, Dr. Ed McGarrell, for decades has worked very closely on violence research with the Department of Justice. And honestly, he's recognized as probably one of the very foremost experts, and he's well known at the Department of Justice. Question 11, are we prepared for the additional evaluator component for this solicitation? This is, I believe, mentioned in the solicitation that there could be an additional evaluator. So my understanding is that the Department of Justice may pick some grant awardee sites to conduct additional evaluation, but that those determinations are made after the grants are awarded. If you decide to apply for this grant and you receive it, and then you're chosen to be one of those sites, those costs would be paid directly by the department and separate from the grant. And then lastly, what is the legacy cost for this program? Are we creating new programs? Some of the performance metrics will include studying program intervention costs and benefits. And if these data demonstrate that a community violence intervention helped create a safer Berrien County and ended up being cost effective by saving money, because certainly violence imposes very tremendous costs on a community, then the program will pay for itself into the future. And it also would be a very attractive candidate for outside future funding, whether it's the same grant or it's some other type of grant that has a similar aim. So with that, I'll pause. I hope I've not spoken too long. I tried to get through concisely all of the 12 questions. And again, they were great questions, and I hope my responses shed a little bit of light as you consider this.
Thank you, Mr. Totten. Did anyone have anything else?
Use your mics.
Yes,
Can I ask one quick question?
sure.
Is this an outcome also of the 200 million that the Justice Department, said that they were investing in state crisis intervention? The timing of the two seem to be similar, so I just want to know if it's part of it.
I don't know for sure, but I believe I read, even as I was reviewing materials this morning, that there were $250 million that was allocated for community violence intervention and prevention programs over 5 years. And this grant is part of that funding. That's my understanding, at least to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
Did anyone else have anything? Mark, I have one follow-up question, if I may, and I'm not in the camera. You can see my hand over there.
I can.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned local flexibility with some of the programming and priorities. Would that include working with organizations like the Truancy Academy, the program in the jail where people are getting help to get their GEDs, basically mentoring, trying to help young people who are at that formative stage in their teens to become moms and dads and have employment. Would those things be within the reach of this grant?
I certainly think they could be. I mean, this grant is focused on trying to identify the people who are most at risk of committing violence in the community against another partner or another person, and then trying to use all of the tools we have, and we're talking about well beyond law enforcement, to try to show an alternative and to provide the resources somebody needs to make different choices. And everything you just mentioned seems to be those types of programs. So, based on what you said, it certainly seems so. And, again, I think the grant really does give flexibility for you all to design a program that works for you all, and you and the stakeholders in your community are going to know better than anyone else what that would look like.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Did anyone have anything else? Jim?
Good morning, sir. I have two questions. The first one is, how long does it take for this process to play out, to do the survey? Is there a time period, or is it just when the money runs out? How long does this program last? I guess my question.
The funding is over 3 years. It allows for time for the planning process. I think typically, that takes probably 3 to 6 months. It can take up to 9 months maybe, but it funds, doing the work of trying to make sure you have all the pieces in order and you have a program that you think can work. And then in total, I believe it lasts 36 months. Because this grant funds existing programs, there are certainly folks, I'm sure, that have been funded in the past and are past their 36 months and are now, coming up and asking for renewal to continue to fund those programs.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, how long after the program is complete do you have to wait to be able to see the results, to measure the success? Is it 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? How long after that do you measure the success?
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner, that's a really good question. I don't know that I'm quite best positioned to answer it. Certainly the researchers that you all decide to work with are gonna know the answer to that. Even off their cuff are gonna know the answer to that. Once a program is up and running, and again, that can, of course, will take some time, but once a program is up and running, it's staffed, and, the prevention programs are at work, I anticipate that, the results will not merely be, results that are 10 years down the road. I think you can expect to see some more immediate results, but again, these programs also take time. So it's not going to be like turning on a faucet where the water suddenly comes out. But again, I think probably that's a really good question to ask the researchers, and I think they will be able to give you a very concrete answer to that question. And if I can be helpful getting a response from them, from the MSU folks, I'm certainly happy to do so.
They all heard me. I didn't have my mic on, so you didn't. I
Okay,
just was
sorry.
thanking you for your time and asking if you had anything else to add before we move forward with our agenda.
Okay, no, I don't. I just want to say thank you again. I know you all are being really thoughtful about this, and in this program or certainly any other way, like I care a lot about Berrien County. We want to be part of the solution. We're just one player, and there's a lot of people. I've really appreciated my relationships with your prosecutor, with your sheriff, with your local chiefs there. They've been really strong partners. And so, through this grant, I hope you all decide to pursue it, but even if you don't, I really want to be a strong partner with you all to address some of the challenges that are there. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yep, take care.
All right, folks, we'll move on. The next item on the agenda, Madam Clerk, I understand we have some communications.
That will be done at the board meeting.
Oh, it will? We're not doing it now? Okay. Oh, I've got the 10:30 agenda. Sorry. Not that I want to get done and go out and do some yard work or anything, but, all right. Public comments. We'll go there. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share? If you do, your name and your town, and try to keep it within 2 minutes. Yes, sir. Is the mic on? Green light on? Okay.
Good morning, Rick Breon, Niles Township. That's a lot to unpack in 2 minutes, what we just heard. One of the things I'd like to mention is that he kept saying Michigan State University is going to be the partner in research. Well, Michigan State University is a big, they're behind the red flag laws that are being pushed through the state right now. And another thing I'd like to say is that research can mean anything you want it to mean. I've taken classes on how to do research. I know how to do research to make it say what I want to say, and it's going to say whatever the people are paying for it wants it to say. You're talking about a $2 million grant now over 3 years, but who's going to pay for this stuff after this grant runs out? That's another question that needs to be answered. And the last thing I want to say about this is that we've been putting programs in schools for years to try and help kids do this and do that, but for the DARE program, for example, we've been doing that ever since I was in school, and the drug problems only got worse. So I don't know how the health department intervening to stop violence is going to do anything other than just put some more money in somebody's pocket. So that's all I got to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, I'm Robin Grafinius, Lincoln Township. I want to share some of the concerns of the previous speaker. I do feel like Michigan State is probably the most liberal place you could possibly go to get any information, especially at this time. But I also want to say that this sounds to me like the cart before the horse. They're putting these grant funds out there, and $2 million is a lot of money as a taxpayer. I think that's ridiculous. And it sounds like there's basically, you can do whatever you want with it. And it just sounds so loose and so undefined that it sounds like corruption. And I'm just being really honest, as a taxpayer, I've kind of had enough of corruption. And secondly, putting the health department in charge is another real issue for me. We couldn't trust them during COVID. In my opinion, they did a horrible job, and they continued to do a horrible job even when they knew that it was way past time. I would not like to see them be in charge of anything else, and especially something that involved $2 million. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Teresa Briand. I'm from Niles City, Michigan. I do want to say first that I have ADHD, and so it can be a little hard for me to speak when I don't have anything planned. But some thoughts after hearing about this new possible grant would be, first thing I thought right away is why Michigan State? I mean, like previous speaker said, it could be anything, but University of Michigan has done wonderful research with certain, like intimate partner violence. They do a lot of studies out there. They're really active in helping their community. I think they work with the Department of Justice too. So I just want to put out there that if this grant was being looked into, to really consider other research options, because I know there's got to be better than Michigan State, and one I would think would be University of Michigan. Another thing I want to say is I totally agree. It made me uncomfortable hearing that the health department plays a part in it when they said something that it could just be the county or the, even maybe the board members. That made me feel that would be a lot more comfortable, because you guys represent the community, instead of letting it go to the health department, which I'm sure lots of people in Berrien County have been affected by. I know that my children and I are one of them. I feel like they failed my children and I. So that's another thing I want to say. But with that, I maybe I'm a dreamer, but this grant does seem like it could be something that does something really amazing for the community. So if you guys do take part in it, I hope there's a way where you get a lot of community feedback in that. Because it sounds like it could be really great, but just allow the community play a part in how it goes. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, sir.
Sean Hill, St. Joe. I know I came in a little late, but I was kind of listening to what was going on while I was driving down the road. But so I just want to say, as a taxpayer, we need to dig deep and just be sure there's no strings attached, because don't necessarily listen to him either. I mean, you can listen to what he has to say, but I would say do your own research on this whole program, because I believe that there are strings attached to this money. And usually when the government comes in and gives you money, there's usually other things that go along with it. So that's all I would ask you, to just be careful, to consider what's going on here. So some words that, President Reagan said at one time, is some of the words that you don't like to hear is, hello, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. So that's what I take from this whole program. Okay. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Yes, ma'am.
Pam Hoover, the two words that,
Where are
couple
you
of,
from, ma'am?
I'm from Stevensville.
Okay, thank you.
Two words that stuck out to me as he was speaking were flexibility. That scares me, because flexibility can be good and it can be bad. It to me meant that they can take it down a road that maybe we didn't want it to go down. And so that was the first one. The second one I already forgot. But anyway, the flexibility part was the part that was, to me, that was a little scary. I thought, well, okay, somebody can get a hold of it and they can run it down something that we just never wanted it to go down. And the people that are in control of it, do we really have control of them? Probably not. So I don't know where we'd end up in that whole scheme of things.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wish to be heard? Okay.
Okay. I'm Victory Woodall and I'm in Lincoln Township. Okay, I had a screenshot of the part I wanted to talk about here. Okay, so what I found when I looked this up from the Department of Justice, it says Justice Department announces over 200 million in investments in state crisis intervention. The very first paragraph of that description of the program, it uses the words, Extreme Risk Protection Order, ERPO, programs that work to keep guns out of the hands of those who pose a threat to themselves or others. To me, that's another phrase for red flag initiatives, and that's a scary term. We're dealing with that already in our state legislature, and I'm fully against that. I know this isn't a law, but there are strings tied to the way this money can be used and the programs it can be used for. And to me, that's just not something we should be signing up for. That's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, Melissa Clapper, Lincoln Township. I just think it behooves us all to look at any possible way and all the options and the tools that we may have available to help with crime reduction, violence, whatever. From what I heard Mr. Totten say, flexibility is going to allow us to fix it so it's within our community, not Lansing, not up north, whatever. It's going to be something that we can look at. I don't know how the stakeholders are going to be. I think that's important. As far as MSU versus another research project or research group, I think that's something that will have to be discussed if that's a concern within the thing. But to just blatantly say we're not going to do it, or you can say you have concerns over red flag laws, but I think you have to look at opportunities and tools that are available so that we don't have to use red flag laws, that we don't have to worry about that kind of thing, but to just kind of say we shouldn't at least try something, I think is kind of not fair to the constituency that's here in Berrien County. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else wish to be heard? Sheriff?
Sheriff Paul Bailey. I live in Berrien Township, if you want to know that too. So I'm just up here to say that I'm not in favor of any gun control or taking rights away from our citizens in Michigan, that responsible gun owners are not part of this grant, shouldn't be part of this grant. I'm in favor of coming up with some programs that I've been working. We've had different programs throughout my 23 years of sheriff, trying to address the violence that affects portions of our county. And we have a lot of violence in Benton Harbor and Benton Township. Okay, that's where most of the gun violence occurs. That's, the guy can't leave out Niles because they have some down there. We have little gun violence in any part of the rest of the county. Not saying that something couldn't happen down there where somebody gets shot with a gun, but the majority of it is happening in our inner city area, where I think this grant will come up with some programs. There's got to be some controls on it. And I think with it going through the health department has to report to Brian Doucette, and before they do anything, needs your permission, right? So I'm all in favor of trying to get young people to stop this violence. On my phone, I get all the gunshots. If there is a unit dispatched to gunshots in our communities, I get that on my phone, no matter if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock, or 10 o'clock in the afternoon. Most of the stuff that I get sent to me where there's shots fired are in Benton Harbor and Benton Township. So how do we address that violence together, but also guarantee that this has nothing to do with coming after our Second Amendment? Because I wouldn't stand for that. I think the red flag law has lots of issues. I'm hoping that the courts will review it and say it's unconstitutional, but I don't know that. But our system, our Constitution is set up, if the legislators pass something that we feel is unconstitutional, that's why we use the courts. Okay, I don't make the laws as the sheriff, the legislators do. So I have to enforce the laws that are passed by the legislators that come down to me when I take that oath, that I will fairly, enforce the laws fairly to everybody. And that's what I try to do. But I also, am a big Second Amendment person. You know, I talked to Guy, I met with Steve Perangeli, and we said this cannot, you know, have to do with guns from good people. This is to address the violence that is occurring in parts of our county. And some of them are guns, but so how do we address those issues and educate our young people to make better choices so they're not killing one another? I have 5 juveniles in my jail right now that I have to keep separate from everybody else. I have to have the deputies feed them because male inmates cannot feed them because of the federal law of keeping male inmates away from those juveniles that I have in the jail, right? 5 with really serious crimes because the courts do not waive them because they have to go through 2 hearings. So if a juvenile commits a homicide or commits an aggravated assault or some other serious crimes, they go to the juvenile center first. And then there's 2 hearings that they have to go in front of a judge before that judge makes a decision. They're waived to adult court. Then I take them and then we have to do all this stuff. So we have RISA coming in because the federal law says that I have to give them educational programs and continue on with their high school academics. And we have RISA that comes in daily to address that. So I hope that, you know, no matter what we do, can we come up with some programs working with Benton Township, Benton Harbor, and Niles, and the rest of the chiefs, but naming those first because that's where most of our violence is occurring. And what do we do together to get that to stop or lessen that? Because my phone goes off every night with shots fired in Benton Harbor, Benton Township. Okay, so and then we have all the homicides. So you know, maybe we should pull up all the homicides that had happened in those areas and share them with everybody. The prosecutor has that. We can look those up. But I know Dan McGinnis is trying to address those issues with the minimal resources he has. Understand that Benton Harbor is down 13 officers, Benton Township's down 13 officers. So the sheriff's office and the state police are going in those areas to help a lot. And then that pulls my deputies away from the unincorporated areas that we can't respond because Benton Harbor has a major problem down there, Benton Township, that pulls my cars off. So I'm praying that they can get officers hired to fill their vacancies. But the issue is that people aren't going into law enforcement right now. You know, in my 23 years, I would try to send 1 deputy from the jail through the academy so we'd have someone that wanted to move to the road could when we had an opening. This past year, I'm sending 10 to the academy because there's nobody out there getting certified. That's why Benton Harbor is down 13 and Benton Township and Niles is down 3. So we were down 6. We got 6 through the academy and they just got off the FTO program. So that's helping us fill the vacancies. And we got 4 more in the academy to fill all the vacancies. And then myself and the undersheriff are trying to recruit people because now Eau Claire, Lake Michigan College, and RISA out on Glenlord, what's it called? Lighthouse wants a resource officer assigned to those schools. So the 14 school districts we have, once we fill those vacancies, there'll only be 1 school district, and that's Bridgman, that doesn't have a resource officer. But I spoke to the superintendent down there, and they're looking into getting 1 for the next school year also. So those are some of the issues, but we got to address this violence to stop it. So, and how do we do that without stumbling on constitutional rights and making sure people feel okay that we're not going to go after their guns? Because as a sheriff, I wouldn't do that. Okay, and I'm still looking into the red flag law. It's too early. It hasn't been signed yet. I've read it. I've talked to people, I've talked to the prosecutor. I'm going to keep looking at it and then we'll move on from there. But that red flag law, there's 2 things that people need to know. If it passes, it won't go into effect possibly until 90 days into 24. There's some people saying at the end of this session, what they feel is the end of 24. So that means it won't go into act until 90 days into 25. Okay, but lawyers are gonna argue that. But we got plenty of time to address our concerns. I did that with MSA and I continue to do that, and Andrew Sheriff and I will continue to address this. But I can say both of us are big supporters of the Second Amendment. And as the sheriff, I will not support anything that takes that right away. So I just want to get up and tell everybody that. But we also got to figure out how can we come up with programs to stop this violence? Okay, so if the health department doesn't oversee it, who can? So that we can put programs to help our young people make better choices so they're not killing one another. And lastly, I got to say, my deputies have to go to all those scenes and see all those dead people. And we have to make sure that they are debriefed and they're getting counseling to make sure that they can deal with all the stuff that they see on a daily basis. And we do that. We have counseling and we have numbers that they can call if they feel they're getting stressed out. So that's the utmost, but I don't know. We need some programs to address this issue. How do we do it so people aren't scared that any rights are going to be taken away from them? And there's lots of restrictions on how this grant moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Did anyone else wish to be heard who we haven't heard from already? Okay, Commissioner Curran, I thought you had a question or comment, and then Commissioner Harrison. Did you have something?
No, sir.
Bob, did you? Okay. When you went like this, I thought you meant I had a second question, but.
I was indicating that was 2 minutes.
Oh. Okay. All right. Well. All right. Guy Miller, did you want to briefly share any thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you for your time and attention this morning. I'd like to point to Administration Policy 6030, which is kind of the process and we're following. So we don't, like Mr. Todd mentioned, we don't have all of our stakeholders identified. We don't have our abstract submitted. We need permission from you guys before we can move forward with even doing a grant application. Once we apply for the grant, where we're going to receive the funds, we also need commission approval to receive the funds and initiate the program. This is the first yes of two. This is a very, very early yes we're looking for, and just saying, can we apply for a grant? I agree, some of this stuff is underdeveloped, but our intention, as the sheriff mentioned, is to focus on behavior. We're focusing on people, and actually we're focusing really on young people is where I want to do this as the director of the health department. So that's the direction I'd like to see this grant go. As the sheriff mentioned, if there's another organization that wants to take the $2 million and create a Berrien County initiative on community violence interventions, that's awesome. I would 100% support that. I would love to be involved a little bit, as it is a public health issue. I think people's lives are at stake, people's mental and social well-being. A lot of the predetermining factors that these young people have before they commit a violent crime is kind of set up. I think the sheriff can list just characteristic traits that these young people have that we could try to mitigate as a community organization with community organizations to reduce the likelihood of violence occurring in our community. That's the goal.
All right, thank you. Anyone? Well, okay. Sheriff, did you just get a helicopter? Yes, ma'am.
Just for reference to the board, the policy referred to by Guy is our purchasing policy, 6030. That has a component in it that relates to grant process, so.
Okay. Quick afterthought. First, those who were here during COVID, remember things occurring in the health department under former directors, things that we would never want to see happen again. Kids certainly have suffered in schools, be it CDC or the teachers union or Dr., the guy who retired, the little dude Fauci. You know, hopefully we've learned from those mistakes. And, but going forward, I'm optimistic that we will exercise oversight if this thing is approved and make sure it's used to address things such as were just alluded to, behavior. One of the best things you can do for a kid is have him or her raised by mom and dad. Kids growing up in single family households, particularly where there's no dad present, are almost scripted to a bad life. And you look at crime data and how it ties to the breakdown of the family unit, teen pregnancy, all these things. These are behaviors. And if we can mentor and help kids get educated, it's one of the best things we can do, and help them defer starting a family until they're prepared to start a family. You know, the unraveling of the social fabric has been occurring for a long time. If we can use this as a starting point to start to weave in and strengthen and reinforce families, I think it'll be time and money well spent. But this board will have an obligation to exercise oversight. I, for one, fully intend to do that if we get this grant. But I also wouldn't want to see it as any kind of backdoor for taking away Second Amendment rights. The people who lawfully possess firearms aren't the ones who are out there shooting up the neighborhoods. And how kids get a hold of guns, sometimes it's like you wonder, how are these weapons out there? And where are the parents? Well, if the parents don't exist, that's part of the problem. So we need to help young people find the pointer, true north on the moral compass. And if we can use this as a way of beginning that process, I am in favor of that. So just my 2 cents worth. Anyone have anything else? All right, we're going to break and go